Tower Hamlets Bow are actually incredibly, if we did our map, you'd see that there's a hell of a lot of creativity out there. I'm looking at the plans for the BBC as a prospective tenant here. We pick up property at £4 a square foot. We're extremely good negotiators, and we let it on at £10 a square foot, all in including service charges. We're extremely good at our business. We work on a very fine margin, and hearing you guys say you pay £80 a square foot in West One, I feel sorry for you. We've just picked up property in Soho, which we're going to be letting out at £18 a square foot. So please come and talk to us earlier rather than later. Artists are also sort of slightly allergic to the logo city idea. They do like to operate, and they do have great visions, and please come and involve us early in your plans rather than after the event. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. There's another one, two in the middle here, if we can get the mic. Let's take you first, and then you can pass the mic back, if you would, afterwards.
Richard Pearce from TCN. Hamish, I'd like to congratulate you, because I think you made the master plan in one sentence, which was to get cheap space going, get people here, the bars and the shops and retailers will follow, and that's probably our master plan for the next 5 years, I think.
Very good. And there's just behind you, actually, in the next row.
Thank you. Yeah, Rowley Keating from BBC. A very interesting panel, portrait of the creative sector, where we've heard about advertising, design, architecture, the arts. And I recognise that because I come from the arts showbiz side of the BBC. But there was another thread coming through, particularly from Caroline's comments this morning, that was about BBC R&D coming here, about the growth of the iPlayer, Imperial coming here. And we're finding that it's the marriage of these kinds of creativity with technology and cutting-edge technological creativity that feels like the biggest transformative growth. And I'm just wondering whether the vision of the creative sector we've heard about encompasses that, and if so, how do we make that marriage work, or are we leaving that to Cambridge and other parts of the country?
Very quick comment on that one, because, Tim, in a sense, it's Darwinian, yeah?
Well, yeah, and I think that's a perfect example of what a grand plan like this building could actually bring to bear, because the pace of technological change is such that it is very, very difficult for individuals to keep up. And when creative people are being creative people, they have to do that in a context that is changing extremely rapidly. So one of the very things that a new structure could help bring into the midst of relatively small groups of creative people would be a connection to, in every possible way, everything that is changing technologically. I'm sure that would be a significant draw.
Thank you. Moira?
I think that's really interesting, and I think one of the things we need to do is make sure we don't label people too easily. The blurring of boundaries between all of this is something we haven't really talked about, but it's hard to distinguish between a creative industry and a cultural industry and an artist, producer, and somebody who works in the gaming industry. So I think recognising that technology is pushing things forward, and it's also pushing, it's merging those boundaries. So as long as we allow for anybody to come into that mix, not just the techie guys or the science guys or the arts guys, but all of them together, and create some space for them to bump into each other. I think that's a very powerful bit of mix. I also think there are many, many of our clients out there now in London who are thinking about how they get their product out in a different way, and they're already well linked into film and television and media. They're out in cinemas, pushing things through there. They're trying very different ways, again, of getting those audiences to feel part of it, even when they can't see or experience the live performance.
Harry?
Yeah, I think you described really the clue to making it work, which is that outward-lookingness. It's engaging what we might term, and you heard like it, creative industries with the rest of the real world. And if we do that, if you do that, then I think it'll work. And we mustn't call it anything with the word creative in the title.
Hamish?
I think one of the things that the BBC could do with this land, given that it's its inheritance, and actually it's our inheritance because we all paid for it, didn't we? I think the BBC needs to bequeath some of this land in trust for these creative industries, particularly, I think, the start-up artists and so on, who we know will fuel this whole thing. So I think this plan, this master plan, needs to have some land in trust. Because if it can be kept in trust, it will be going out at £4 to £10 a foot. that will enable all these startup businesses to start. The other thing we know is that these small businesses, if they're successful, they grow really, really quickly. They need to move from unit to unit to unit almost once a year. So they need to start with 2,000 feet, then 10, then 15, then 20. And you've got to create a cluster of buildings and entities which allow that to happen, and then allow the next bunch of people to come through the system. Creative industries, you can also think of creative industries as creating the cash flow to generate property development. And a lot of these businesses have their pension fund in their building. So you've got to allow them to get through the system really cost effectively, and then they'll go and buy a property somewhere nearby. And that will also regenerate the area.
Lots of ideas there. Let me draw this session to a close by noting that unlike East London, which has been sucking on the teat of public subsidy for decades, West London doesn't. Land values in West London are quite strong because of Heathrow, not universally, but generally speaking. So the dilemma is where you have something which is actually, it's on the central line, it's only just outside the West End, the land values in W12 are not at all bad. How do you deal with a situation where the fast money will be looking for big returns, and if not £80 a square foot rent, certainly 40 to 50, with the desire, on the other hand, as it were, have that ground plane of the Marais with its cheap and cheerful, and I'll use the word creative, varieties of people of all sorts. How do you get the slow money to do that? Is it possible? Can you have lost leaders? You certainly, in locational terms, Westfield have proved that people like coming to West London, even from outside West London. The Earl's Court redevelopment will see 2.5 times the size of the Olympic Village, 8,000 homes, plus a series of destinations, and that other creative cluster of Earl's Court with all its activities being moved into Olympia as part of that development. So there is critical mass and plenty of money. And I think one of the things for both the master plan and also the BBC's decisions will be the extent to which it wants to be fast or slow, the extent to which it stays in to get the value, and to some extent to determine some of the desirable outcomes in the future of the kind of creative health of London. After the break, Steve Norris is going to chair the session before London. I'll introduce him now simply by saying former Transport Minister, major advisor to the Mayor, which is just as well. He was a candidate twice for the mayoralty of London, and although he didn't quite make it, I suppose one could describe him as having made London safe for Boris Johnson. We're going to break back at 11:20 promptly, please, and in the meantime, can I thank the panel on your behalf?